Hi there. In today's MG Workplace series, we're talking about performance reviews. I'd be surprised if at some stage in your career you haven't had a performance conversation. Or you might be in my situation where you've had plenty, some which were good, some perhaps not so good. I always remember quite a few years ago hearing a senior executive speak, and she talked about what she called the forgettery. Now, the forgettery, that's the place which for her was where all that unhelpful, useless, ill-advised, not very wise performance feedback went to die. And it made me think about all of the times that we can take on board feedback that's actually just not helpful because it's not couched in reality. It's not delivered with good intent, and therefore it's not helpful. I've had, particularly through the work that I do now, heard some horror stories about performance conversations. But those horror stories, they go both ways. It's the horror stories from the leader who's involved in delivering the performance conversation, and also the horror stories for the person who's on the end of it. For the employee, the horror stories usually center around, hey, the person I work for just doesn't seem to have any idea as to what I'm doing or the challenges that I'm facing. They don't seem genuinely interested in providing helpful feedback. The feedback might be too surface, not actually detailed enough, not timely enough. For the leader, it can be the person just doesn't seem to hear what it is that I'm saying. It feels combative, or it feels as though the person is just sitting on the other end and it's like they're half listening. I'm not sure what they're really taking on board. Just like all conversations, all relationships, the best, they're two ways. Both parties turn up to the conversation with good intent. The interesting thing about bad performance conversations is they are rife across industries, organizations. And academics and researchers Elaine Polokis and colleagues found that in many cases, those formal management processes, all they do, they just disengage people and they don't actually positively impact performance outcomes. Sharing their findings back in 2019, they found that the rating measures that organizations often use is limited in terms of the value that it actually offers. And if we look at research from Gallup, they found that only 14% of employees strongly agree that their performance review actually inspires them to improve. So this means across the board, we must be doing some things that aren't effective in how we set performance conversations up. So let's go through some ideas. Now, these are ideas that work on both sides of the fence. The most important thing is feedback matters. As humans, we want feedback, but feedback that is couched in reality, conscious of the context in which we are working, delivered in a way that shows genuine interest in who we are as a human, is genuinely invested in helping us grow and develop, which means it needs to be delivered with good intent, with care, and with connection. Most importantly, the feedback needs to be relevant, which means it needs to be timely. If the feedback is too dated, it's really hard for the person who's hearing it to connect, because by that time, they've either rewritten the story as to what actually went on, or they may not even remember the precise details and context of the issue. So when you're thinking about this as a leader, think about the times when you need to provide that in-the-moment feedback. You want to do feedback that's regular and that's timely. Also be aware, context really matters. Yes, we're through the pandemic in many respects, but there is still a lag. There's still a lot of economic uncertainty, community uncertainty. So many employees, many of your team members, perhaps even yourself, have heightened levels of anxiety and stress and burnout. In dealing with this uncertainty, what you don't want to do is create another layer of uncertainty when you're doing performance conversations. That can happen when you're not conscious of how you set up the performance conversation, or perhaps you set the date for the performance conversation as the leader and then you cancel and don't have it for many weeks. And in between this, the team members sitting there going, hang on, why was it cancelled? If it was cancelled or moved, that shows that giving feedback to me doesn't really matter. You need to be sensitive to what's going on for your team members. Likewise, for team members, be sensitive, aware of what's going on for your leaders as well. You want to be conscious of everyone's unique circumstances and what they're bringing to the table. Next, focus on purpose. Be really clear. What's the purpose of the conversation? Does it connect into that annual performance review cycle where you're looking at promotions and pays and salaries and perhaps bonuses? Or are you doing in the moment, that more regular type of feedback? So get clear on why you're having the conversation and why you're having it now. And you want to do that before you've even walked into the conversation, because if you can set that purpose really clearly up front, that means both parties are coming to the conversation really clear as to what's the intent. Why is it that we're having this conversation now? Next, and this should go without saying, but sadly, I do need to say it, strive for positive intent. And look, we're not talking about the crap sandwich where you say one good thing, one negative thing, then another good thing, but really overarching, what's the intent that you're taking into the conversation? And as the team member, what's your intent? What is it that you want to learn about yourself? Learn about how you contribute, learn about how you can grow. The best conversations are the ones where both parties come to that conversation really clearly and genuinely invested in getting a good outcome. For a leader, that might mean that you need to recognize perhaps those KPIs that were set 12 months ago, perhaps are no longer relevant. Are you assessing your team member against a yardstick that no longer holds weight because the context, the environment in which they're working has completely changed? So when you think about it as well, don't just focus on the task. Focus on how they interact as a team. Focus on their contribution beyond the work that they're doing. Think about the behaviors. And then pay attention to the details. And by the details, I mean the infrastructure, the environment in which you're going to be having that conversation. And this is particularly important with many of us still doing work from home. It's awesome if you can be in the same room with each other. Sometimes that's no longer possible. If you are doing that performance conversation remotely, who's going to be in the background? Are they doing it in a work environment where perhaps their partner or their flatmates can hear the conversation? Is there going to be issues with connectivity? Is it that they could be interrupted? Could there be children wandering in halfway through the conversation? You really want to make sure that you've spent time on both sides. One, for the leader, you want to be in a quiet environment. And two, as the team member, you want to be in a quiet environment too. So think about that optimal location where there's the right level of privacy. And also, if you are then having the conversation in an office, make sure the office you're using is soundproof. And then think about your headspace. Because when you're engaging in a feedback conversation, so starting it off, delivering, when you want to hear what the other person is saying, you want to be in the right headspace. Relaxed, not stressed, not overtly busy. You don't want to be distracted. You don't want to be thinking about that next big meeting that might be coming down the track. So agree on a time when you're most likely that both of you are going to be in a good headspace for the conversation. And then next, get really clear on those next steps. So it is a conversation. It is not a one-way diatribe. Once you've had the conversation, as the leader, one of the great things you can do at the end is get your team member to replay what it is that they're taking away from the conversation. You want to be really clear on what those agreed next steps are. Feedback matters. Always has, always will. But feedback won't help you as the leader. It won't help your team if you're the team member if it's not structured well. If you're not ready to hear, if you're not ready to engage, and most importantly, if there's not trust between both parties engaging in the conversation. Now, if you want more specific tips for both you as a leader and also you as a team member, have a look at the link that I have included in the show notes below. Have a great week.